off-white walls and a sort of orange light.
Well, I've got the window in, so there's some kind of sense of daylight. Well, you're an economics professor anyway, so that makes sense.
That's
Firstly, thanks for taking the time to chat with me.
That's all right.
Why don't you just
Introduce myself?
Yeah, why don't you do that instead of talking gobbledygook?
So I'm an economics professor at the University of Bristol.
So what is economics?
Well, so it's usually described as the allocation of scarce resources. So the first thing is, I think economists really worry about incentives. Second, kind of we place a big emphasis on quantitative evidence. So, we spend a lot of time kind of crunching data and providing quite hard evidence. And then the third thing is we worry a lot about kind of trying to identify causal relationships. So if you want to change behaviour, you want to try and expose kind of causal mechanisms. So not just, people who are more educated earn more, but, what does education do to actually kind of increase earnings?
What would you say the main incentives are that drive our choices?
More of the literature now is focusing on kind of other things that might matter. So how are we influenced by, like sort of social pressure, or how are we influenced by emotional kind of responses? So those other things are kind of seen as important.
So if there's sort of three camps of how I feel, my emotions, what people around me are doing, and what incentives, financial incentives are available. If they had said, oh, many people give, what do you care about? And if you give, we'll give you an extra tenner or an extra 1%. That may have been the most compelling thing you could have offered.
So it's interesting. You're also kind of suggesting these things work in combination. So we haven't tested the kind of the combination. It's kind of like, you have a menu. If you have financial plus social plus emotional, does that, that kind of all, I don't know, that's interesting.
Yeah. Why are you interested in giving?
I think it is because it is kind of quite a rich sort of topic to study. There's quite a lot of innovation in the UK charitable sector. So, organisations like sort of Just Giving, who I've been working with, there's kind of, they're doing kind of interesting things, and there's kind of a lot of data there. So I guess, online platforms have a lot of data.
Over the last 5 years, you've been looking at charitable behaviour and why people do what they do and what changes their behaviour. Out of all the studies that you've done, of which I'll try and link as many as I can below, what is the thing that you found most interesting?
If you take a kind of a long-term period, so in the UK we looked at kind of 30 years, the share of GDP, which has basically has gone to charity, has been pretty constant.
Is it about 2%?
Yes, about 1.5%. There have been introduction of kind of tax incentives. We had kind of a lot of innovation, but actually kind of, there's been some fluctuation, but the overall kind of share of the total pie going to charity hasn't really increased. I think a lot of the research has been focusing on kind of sort of small changes around kind of the margins, but actually at some point we probably should spend more time thinking about some of the fundamental things that drive charitable giving.
Do you think that is then the way things are, there is some natural level there at sort of 1.5%, 2%? Or could you imagine something coming that allowed it to jump to 2.5%, 3% of GDP?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be there forever. You could have some very simple changes which could be hugely effective. So if we look at kind of giving as a share of spending, poorer households are less likely to give, but when they do give, they give a higher share of their kind of sort of resources. So the rich tend to give a kind of a smaller share of their total resources. So you could do a lot by just kind of, creating social norms around kind of acceptable levels of giving. So the church used to do that with tithing. If you kind of succeeded in that, you could really shift the share of the pie.
Well, you did a bunch of data analysis on Just Giving. What was interesting about what you found there?
Yeah, so Just Giving is kind of an interesting model in terms of giving, because there's sort of quite a rich social dimension to it. If you kind of take sort of a single £100 donation, it can kind of increase the size of the subsequent donations by about £10. So you should just, give yourself a nice big donation early on, and then that's kind of one way to try and increase the total amount of money going to your site. But you do have to be careful. So small donations then have a downward effect. So.
But that is all in the context of a donation site where there is a focus on how much each individual donation is.
It's kind of slightly sort of strange because, in a sense, the targets on Just Giving pages are quite meaningless in terms of the charity. If you're raising, if you're raising, £1,000 for cancer research is, gets millions and millions of pounds worth of donations. Whether or not you make your target is not critical to cancer research. No. But if you, it's almost like you've set this as an aspiration, which I think is part of their model. You know, part of why you're giving is because you care about the fundraiser and about how much the fundraiser raises, because you want to help them fulfill their goal.
Which is quite distant or disassociated from the actual impact of the person who has a problem that needs help or the animal that needs help.
There's this research which is kind of suggesting that in an intermediated model, so when somebody else is asking you to give to charity, not the charity itself, you sort of care slightly less about what the charity's doing. So it kind of does create this kind of distance.
Interesting to hear your learnings and findings from the Just Giving analysis, but what stuff are you interested in or have a hypothesis around that you're yet to see any evidence for?
How does kind of, you know, lots of people kind of giving to or fundraising for one charity kind of affect kind of giving and fundraising for another charity? So the Ice Bucket Challenge. So like huge impact in terms of kind of the level of donations to kind of ALS and MND charities. Kind of relative to the previous kind of levels, and it was just like, you know, orders of magnitude more donations to those charities.
It's over $100 million in 30 days.
Yeah, that they'd ever had before. So, you know, so a lot of people were quite critical of kind of this whole thing. So they were critical of like the motivations for people doing it, and they were also very critical that, you know, like maybe ALS charities weren't kind of the best recipients, but we really kind of don't know. We don't know how, you know, what the Ice Bucket Challenge did to kind of giving to other charities. So I think, you know, I think that would be kind of really important to know, because, you know, I'm sure we're going to get more of this.
With social media, we are all more empowered to create content and to share it than we were 10 years ago when models like Just Giving came about. Yes. Where it was before that whole paradigm shift happened towards us having our own digital identities, for better or worse. You know, before selfies became everywhere. I don't think it's the last that we'll see of people making their own donation and sharing that with a fun, creative element or aspect to it, putting a strong emphasis, not just out broadcasting to the world, but putting a strong emphasis, a tag as it were, onto the next person, because those tools are available now and they weren't available 10 years ago to make that nice and easy.
So the motivations of people to do the ALS charity was criticised because, you know, it's all about yourself, it's kind of, you know, it's narcissism rather than altruism, but, you know, I don't think we're going to get away from people doing selfies and doing sort of self-promotion. If people are going to do selfies for a good reason, then I think that's kind of better than doing selfies for no reason, which is what they're going to do anyway. So, you know, I think I'm working out, you know, it was just very clever because, you know, they managed to get people to kind of, you know, combine promoting themselves with promotion of a good cause. So I guess charities are thinking, oh, how can we kind of get on this bandwagon? But it'd be interesting to know if charities can actually do that, because, you know, the two most successful examples we've had have not come from the charity.
There is a sense of this sort of feeling of empowerment that the people themselves can come up with ideas and we own it rather than an institution. The blurry line between narcissism and altruism has always been there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. So it's very obvious in the US. So this workshop was at Harvard, and people were joking that soon they were literally going to have to put names on individual bricks because so many people like wanted to give and then wanted to have a building named after them.
The way I see giving, the giving pot, is it's part of your disposable income, and so I'm taking money out of restaurants and out of fashion shops and out of other disposable income places that you might not need to spend that money. The more I can take it out of there and put it into giving to stuff that matters, I'm happy. And if I get people to do it for fairly narcissistic reasons in the first instance, but they actually genuinely develop a bit of a habit of doing this by doing it more regularly in their daily lives, then I'm happy with that. I feel, and I can't necessarily prove it yet, but I feel that that's a good habit to develop, even if the first instance of why you started doing it wasn't really for purely altruistic reasons.
There are sort of two motivations. One, because you care about the sort of the public good that the charity is providing, and two, because basically you get a warm glow. There's something about giving that kind of makes you feel happier. But no one's ever really unpacked the warm glow. I think if you unpack it, you find out it's a combination of, you know, you like your friend who's asking, or, you know, you like the fact that you get to feel good about yourself, or you it makes you feel good that other people think good things about you. Most of the kind of the evidence in the economics literature suggests that it's the warm glow part that kind of drives most of the giving. So you just have to kind of figure out which of, you know, what is it within the warm glow that you think is going to have the biggest effect.
I am interested in trying to understand, trying to help people to enter into a scheme that allows them to get together with others, to be affected by other stuff going on and other people giving, to then begin to measure where they are in terms of their habit of giving, from how long has it been since I last did it, how does that compare to my norm, and how does that sort of compare to other people's?
Yes.
And hopefully through that kind of gathering together and highlighting and having something to measure, hopefully that will lead people into more of that habit, which I think could be immensely helpful for society. And obviously I believe that if there's something that could move that GDP dial, it's actually people getting into a habit, bringing it to the surface so that they can focus on that habit in a way that we haven't focused on it before. Well, the day I get to show you our data and you crunch those numbers and say, David, I think you've done something interesting here with these people, that would be a good day.
It's all very interesting. It's just whether it works or not, how big the effect is.
That is the sole goal now for my team and I, is to try to find a way to help people capitalise on that warm glow, to enjoy giving and do it more regularly, and hopefully yield more and solve more problems.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Good luck.
Thank you. Cheers.